Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I am one of your moderators, John Becker, the other, John North. He is by my side and we are pleased to have our panel back with us. Susan Richardson-Williams, she's a Republican. Don Bosch is a Democrat. Great to have you back in the studio as well.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yes.
Again.
Nice to be in the studio, yes.
Yes, Mr.
It's been
Bosch,
a while.
welcome.
Likewise.
It has been a while.
Via Zoom, we have another guest, and that is Jesse Mayshark, and he is one of the co-publishers of the online Compass, and they do all things Knox County government and Knoxville city government. Jesse, great to have you with us. We're going to line with you first on money and politics. And John North and I have a few questions before our panel weighs in. But you wrote about this in the last few weeks, and we want to focus specifically on PACs, political action committees, and their influence on this election. What can you say you found when you looked at the numbers?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, there was nothing super surprising. I mean, what we know about political action committees is that different organizations, different groups use them strategically to support candidates, who they want to elect. And also to send messages, basically. And so traditionally, you see more business-oriented PACs, industry group PACs contributing to the Republican Party, traditionally the business-friendly party. And the biggest donors on the Democratic side tend to be labor organizations, teachers groups, and government employee groups. In particular, in Tennessee, it's interesting for a state that we don't think of as a very labor-heavy state. There's one labor group that is very prominent in the political action committee realm, and that's TEAM, which is a group of Tennessee state employees and retirees. And one thing that struck me looking at the disclosures in this cycle was that they donated to literally every incumbent. Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter. They were covering their bases. And so, I think that's just one example of the ways that different groups kind of use these large infusions of money to make their presence known to people who are running for office.
Jess, as you know, this year, Randy McNally and Cameron Sexton pushed for and got a new law which was sort of to shine a greater light on so-called dark money nonprofit operators who contribute money, who they've gotten away with not having to be real specific. I'm just curious if, in looking through at the numbers that you did, if you saw any evidence of that new reporting, or I think that $5,000 was the dollar figure that rang the bell. If you've seen any of that evidence yet, if that law sort of is manifesting itself.
I haven't seen, but also that law affects the period right before an election. And, we're still a few days out here. And so I think it's worth watching that as we get closer to the election. But, it's a good point to talk about the dark money groups, because in a way, I feel like talking about PACs, those of us who have followed politics for a long time are kind of conditioned to think about PACs, because for a long time, they were the biggest influential factor in campaign finance. But since Citizens United and the explosion of the dark money groups, PACs seem almost a little bit quaint. Like, they have to disclose their donors. They have to disclose their contributions. There's a whole level of transparency there that, even with this new law that you mentioned, is still mostly absent for the dark money groups.
I want to open this question up to our panel, but Jesse, I want to start with you because you and I talked about it, and that is, does money buy influence? You suggested a little nuance to that. Explain it.
Well, I think that it buys access. And what everybody who works in the lobbying realm will tell you is that they're not expecting to buy a vote. They're just hoping for a friendly face at the door when they come knocking. And I think there's a lot to that, I mean, of course, we have had actual bribery scandals in the past, but PAC donations are a little bit different. They are public. Everybody has to see them. And so it's not that they don't have any influence, but I think it's probably a mistake to assume that $1,000 here or, $15,000, as some of the PACs are able to contribute, is necessarily going to control anybody's vote.
Susan, just like Jesse, you have worked in government. Does a donation buy somebody an open door?
It does help. I will say that. I don't think any lobbyist would tell you they're trying to buy influence, but it certainly helps with access. I found it really interesting. One of Jesse's columns was talking about one of our local legislators, Michelle Carringer, who doesn't have an opponent, but has raised a lot of money from PACs. And I think she's a new legislator. They want to get to know her. It certainly would, if I were she in that situation, I would certainly meet with them. And lobbyists perform a really good service. I know they have a bad name, but they really do give information for their clients to the legislators, and it's important to have them.
Don, your take on money in politics?
I have a little different take than Susan. I'm not quite as, I think that's a little bit of a naive approach to think that it doesn't buy you, it certainly buys you access, it does buy you influence. Also, when you couple the fact that the lobbyists are largely responsible for writing much of the legislation that we see go to the floor and get voted on, the combination of their ability to access legislators, to write the legislation because we have part-time citizen legislators, I think those two things in combination make for a pretty dangerous formula and make that lobbyist segment very powerful. And I think they do buy access and they do buy favor, so to speak. It may not be overt and direct, but I'm not so naive to think that it doesn't get somebody's attention.
Jesse, before you leave us, just a minute left. Your thoughts on money in politics as we close this part of our segment. What should voters keep in mind as they head to the polls about what that means?
Well, I think the important thing to know is that all of these records are public, and they are mostly accessible online, both local and at the state level. They don't make it the easiest thing in the world to find, but you can find them. And I think it's worth taking a look at. Whoever you're going to vote for, it's kind of good to know who is really propping them up in a way.
Jesse Mayshark, co-founder, co-publisher of The Compass. It's a great online subscription service that covers Knox County government and Knoxville city government as well. Jesse, always good to see you. We're going to be back with more of our conversation right after this.